She built the brand. She designed the logo. She wrote the copy, built the website, hosted the first retreat, recruited the first clients, and stood on that stage with a microphone and told 30 women that what they were about to experience would change their lives. She was right, just not in the way she meant. Because while she was running the workshops and managing the retreats and growing the community from the front, her husband was running something else entirely from behind it. Something that had a different name. Something that the law had a very specific word for. And when she found out, she didn't run. She didn't collapse. She didn't call a lawyer and disappear. She put on a wire, and she went back in. Let's call her Nkechi. 38 years old. A trained therapist with a background in trauma recovery and a genuine, deep belief in the power of community healing. She had spent 12 years working in clinical settings before her husband, a man named Solomon, suggested they combine her expertise with his entrepreneurial instincts and build something of their own. The brand they created was called Roots and Rise, a luxury wellness company, offering retreats, breathwork intensives, healing circles, and what Solomon described as immersive transformation experiences. It was beautiful, thoughtfully designed, authentically positioned, rooted in Nkechi's real clinical knowledge. Nkechi was the face, the voice, the credibility. She wrote the curriculum, led the sessions, built the community. Women came from across the country. They came broken and they left. Many of them genuinely better. Nkechi made sure of that. It was real work, important work. She was proud of it. Solomon handled the business side, the finances, the logistics, the healing residence, a large property 2 hours from the city that he said was for staff and extended retreat guests. Nkechi had been there twice. It seemed fine. She had no reason to look more closely. She had every reason to look more closely. She simply didn't know that yet. The woman who knocked on Nkechi's door on a Wednesday evening in November was named Grace. She was 26 years old. She had attended a Roots and Rise retreat 14 months earlier, recommended by a friend, drawn in by the genuine testimonials, and specifically by a video of Nkechi speaking about trauma recovery that she had watched 3 times before booking. Grace had gone to the retreat in crisis, a difficult year, a family estrangement, the kind of vulnerability that made a community feel like exactly what she needed. What she found there was warmth, connection, and a man named Solomon who had a particular gift for identifying exactly what a person most needed to hear. Over the following months, Solomon had quietly cultivated a relationship with Grace and 7 other women from various retreats. Not romantic or not primarily, something more insidious. He had made each of them feel chosen, special, part of an inner circle that the general retreat community didn't know about. He called it the foundation. He said it was for women ready to go deeper. Going deeper meant cutting contact with family members Solomon identified as energetically toxic. It meant transferring portions of savings into a healing fund he managed personally. It meant, for 3 of the women, moving into the healing residence, the property Nkechi had visited twice and found perfectly fine, and living there under a schedule Solomon controlled entirely. Grace had been in the healing residence for months. She had given Solomon $62,000. She had not spoken to her mother in 8 months because Solomon had told her the relationship was blocking her healing. She had left on a Tuesday night while Solomon was in the city. She had walked to a petrol station 2 miles down the road and called a friend she had been told to cut off. And then she had spent 3 days tracing Nkechi's personal address, not the business address, the home address, and driven there alone. She knocked on the door because she said later she believed Nkechi didn't know. She was right. Nkechi listened to Grace for 3 hours. She asked clinical, careful questions, the same questions she would have asked a client in a trauma assessment. She took notes. She did not cry. She did not react visibly in any way that would have told Grace she was destroyed inside. After Grace left safely, with a number to call if she needed anything, Nkechi sat alone in her kitchen until 4 in the morning. She thought about the women she had stood in front of, the ones she had genuinely helped, and the one Solomon had been watching from the back of the room, identifying, marking, waiting. She thought about her own name on that brand, her face, her voice, her clinical credentials used as bait for women who came looking for healing and found something else entirely waiting for them. By morning, she had made two decisions. The first was that she would not confront Solomon. Not yet. The second was that she would call a contact she had at a specialist investigations unit, a woman she had worked with years earlier on a case involving coercive control, and tell her everything she knew. The investigator listened, asked her own careful questions, and then said something Nkechi had not expected. "We have had 3 separate reports about this organization in the past 8 months. We have not been able to get inside it. Would you be willing to help us?" Nkechi said yes before the sentence was finished. For 6 weeks, she continued running routes and rise exactly as before. She led retreats. She facilitated healing circles. She smiled at Solomon over dinner. She answered his questions about the business with the calm, practiced ease of a woman who had spent 12 years managing the emotional weight of other people's worst moments and knew, better than almost anyone, how to keep her own face completely still. For 2 of those 6 weeks, she wore a recording device. On the morning of the 43rd day, Solomon held what he called a founders gathering at the healing residence, an invitation-only event for the women of the foundation. It had the aesthetic of a wellness retreat: candles, flower arrangements, carefully chosen music. It had the structure of something else entirely. Nkechi was not invited. She had never been invited to a founders gathering. She had not known they existed until Grace knocked on her door at 11:17 in the morning, while Solomon stood at the front of a room of 14 women and spoke about the next phase of their collective healing journey. The doors of the healing residence opened. Investigators entered from 3 sides simultaneously. Solomon saw them before anyone else did. He turned toward the back of the room, an old instinct, looking for an exit, and found that the back of the room was also covered. He was arrested in front of all 14 women, in the room he had built, surrounded by the people he had controlled, with recordings of his own voice documenting everything he had done in careful, incriminating detail. He said nothing as they let him out. For the first time in a very long time, he had nothing to say. Solomon was charged with fraud, coercive control, and unlawful financial manipulation across 11 counts. The prosecution built their case on financial records, the testimony of 6 women from the foundation, and 2 weeks of recorded conversations that left very little room for interpretation. Nkechi testified on the 3rd day of the trial. She sat in that witness stand and spoke for 4 hours. She described the brand she had built, the clinical framework she had developed, the specific language Solomon had learned from her therapeutic language, trauma-informed language, and repurposed as tools of manipulation against the very women it was designed to protect. She was composed throughout, clear, precise, the most damaging witness of the entire trial, not because she was emotional, but because she was not. Because she understood, clinically, exactly what had been done and could explain it in terms that left no room for doubt. Solomon's defense tried to suggest she had known that the brand had been a joint operation, and her testimony was self-serving. The prosecution played 3 recordings in response. In each one, Solomon could be heard, in his own words, explicitly concealing the foundation from Nkechi, referring to her in one recording as the cover. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Solomon was convicted on all 11 counts. He was sentenced to 14 years. When the verdict was read, Nkechi did not react visibly. She looked straight ahead. She breathed. And when it was over, she walked out of that courtroom into the afternoon light and stood there for a moment, alone before anyone reached her. Grace was the first person to find her. She didn't say anything. She just stood beside her. That was enough. Nkechi dissolved roots and rise 6 weeks after the verdict. Not because she was done with the work. She was not done with the work, but because the brand carried a contamination she could not clean. She would not ask the women who had been harmed to walk back into a name Solomon had used against them. She built something new, a smaller organization, privately funded, with a board of advisors that included 2 of the women from the foundation and a legal specialist in coercive control. She named it after no one. She gave it a name that meant simply to come back to yourself. A portion of every program fee went directly to a cult recovery fund she established in partnership with an existing survivor organization. Two of the women from the healing residence, including Grace, trained as facilitators and now work with her full-time. The third woman from the residence moved back to her family, reconnected with her mother, started over quietly in a different city on her own terms. She sends Nkechi a message on the anniversary of the day she testified. Every year, without fail, it says the same thing each time. Still here, still me. Solomon built his operation on one foundational assumption: that Nkechi's competence, her credibility, her genuine goodness would shield him indefinitely. That the woman who had built everything real about the brand would never look closely enough to see what was happening beneath it. He was wrong about almost everything, but he was most wrong about that. Because the thing about a woman who has spent 12 years sitting with other people's pain, who has trained herself to see what is hidden, to hear what is not being said, to understand the patterns that most people miss, is that when she finally turns that skill toward the person closest to her, there is nowhere left to hide. Nkechi did not set out to bring Solomon down out of anger. She did not do it for revenge. She did it because 14 women had walked through a door she had opened, trusting her name, her face, her credentials, and deserved someone to walk back in and get them out. She was that someone. She had always been that someone. Solomon had simply never understood what he was standing next to. This has been our 10th story on Served Cold. 10 episodes, 10 reckonings, 10 moments where the truth arrived, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And everything that had been built on deception finally had to account for itself. We're not finished. We're just getting started. Some people learn too late that loyalty isn't just a word. And karma keeps excellent records. This has been Served Cold. I'll see you tomorrow.